Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Executive. It's Tuesday, the 4th of November. I'm Councillor Claire Douglas. I'm the leader of the Council and the chair of this committee. And Executive is one of the two main decision-making committees of the Council, Executive and Full Council. So we are going to start, first of all, with apologies. Item 1 on the agenda. We have no apologies. Councillor Pavlovic is on his way. He's just running late. Oh, sorry, apologies. We do have some apologies. That Councillor Ravilius is unable to be with us this evening, so she's not here. And Councillor Pavlovic will be here any moment, I hope. Item number 2 is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? No, there are none. Therefore, thank you for that. Item number 3 is exclusion of press and public, and that is to consider excluding press and public under agenda item 7. And that's on the grounds that it contains information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. And this information is classed as exempt under paragraph 3 of Schedule 12A to section 100A of the local. And this is in relation to Christmas market access. So it is the appendices at the end of the report that are particularly private and would require press and public exclusion if we were to speak about them specifically. So we always try and avoid going into private session. So can I see anybody that thinks that they would need to speak about those private sections of that paper? No. Okay. So in that case, then we won't proceed to vote to exclude press and public at this point in time. When we're on that agenda item, then please do not speak about those specifically. And Bryn Roberts, the monitoring officer, will tell us if he feels that we are verging on that, and will stop us therefore. And if we want to continue on that conversation, we will at that point need to exclude press and public. Okay, thanks everybody. Item number 4 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of October. Can I see those who are in favour of approving those as a fair record of that meeting? Councillor Pavlovic, are you approving minutes as well? Very good, thank you. So that's unanimously approved. And then we move into item number 5, which is public participation. And today we have 4 speakers that are listed here. I believe everybody is due to be in the room, and I can see that everybody is here. Very good. Right, good, thank you. So everybody will have 3 minutes to speak, and you come and sit at the table, please. You'll need to turn the microphone on. So there's a button on the mic and the red areas to the side. As you can see, mine is on here. Those red sections will come on when the mic is on. I'll tell you if I can't see if they've been switched on, and so we can assist you if need be. So Louise Hampson is going to be our first speaker. Please come to the table, Louise. Welcome to Executive. She's going to speak on agenda item 8. That's major projects, Castle and Eye of York update report and next steps. And would you like me to give you a 30-second warning, Louise? So if you can turn the mic on. Just press, that's the one. There you go, you've done it. Right, so I'll give you 30 seconds, off you go. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter. I'm Dr. Louise Hampson. I'm part of the University of York, and I'm drawing on the research I'm currently conducting on the history of the Jewish communities in York from the 12th century onwards. I've been closely involved with the consultations undertaken by the team working on Castle Gateway and the Castle Eye space projects, focusing particularly on the area around Clifford's Tower, and with the local Jewish community, as well as other Jewish communities across the country and the world. This is an area of the city rich in history, with overlapping and intersecting stories. but the national and international significance of the Jewish heritage around the events of 1190 are of exceptional importance. People come from all over the world to be in that space, sometimes as individuals, but often in groups. They come seeking time to be in a space with enormous emotional and spiritual significance for them, akin in many cases to a pilgrimage. For those that can, climbing the steep steps to go inside Clifford's Tower is a powerful experience. But for those who cannot make the climb, or for whom that experience would be too intense, there needs to be a way of meeting those needs. The development of this area, I believe, offers a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create a space within the wider plans for that area, which recognises the extraordinary significance of this intangible heritage, both in York's history and that of Jewish communities across the world. It should offer people a place to step out of the bustle of other visitors and be able to take the time to reflect, to pray, to acknowledge what happened here, and to be able to do so easily, without fear of being in the way or being hurried on by the traffic of other users in that space. This, I believe, requires clear delineation without being exclusionary, and should be accompanied by interpretation which acknowledges that users will need accurate information about the events of 1190, but which sets this primary story sensitively into the wider context of the multivalent histories of that space, in ways which allow people to engage with their own thoughts and reflections. Whilst acknowledging and understanding that budgets have been reduced and some aspects of the wider scheme as originally envisaged have had to be reviewed, I would urge members to ensure that in any permissions granted, this fundamental principle of creating a defined, generous, beautiful, safe and inclusive gathering space in which this story is clearly and sensitively told, and where everyone from large school groups exploring history to elderly people wanting to step out, sit down and be with their own thoughts is not cut back. Current world events have made the circumstances and events of 1190 feel particularly resonant, and this scheme could and should be an opportunity to show that York not only knows its history, but learns from it and can teach the rest of the world about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those contributions, and they'll certainly be taken into account when we consider that item later in the agenda. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Lillian Coulson, and she also wants to speak on agenda item 8, that's major projects, Castle and Eye of York update report and next steps. So Lillian, would you like me to give you 30-second warning as well?
I'm struggling within the 3 minutes, so
yes.
Is the microphone still on?
Yes, it is. Yes, yeah. So 3 minutes is a hard cut off because we have to be fair with everybody. But so I'll tell you when you've got 30 seconds
Okay,
left.
thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
As a long-standing consultee, YLJC requests that the current proposals be amended to become more inclusive, better meet the needs of its current users, better telling its important history, and also reflect York's values today. To meet your financial constraints, we suggest that the current phasing of some elements be reconsidered to ensure that what is included and implemented in Phase 1 will be meaningful and perform its intended function. The scheme's evolution has reinstated much-needed blue badge parking, but the requested numerous seating areas around the pathway as a whole are now concentrated mainly in around the enlarged children's play area and the Eye of York, with little along other main walkways of the Clifford's Tower green space, and the removal of the event space included the removal of the 1190 Memorial Garden. Any commemoration, contemplation, prayer and learning is now expected to take place on the move, on the new circular path to be built into the base of the mound around Clifford's Tower. The master plan now annotates a single bench as the 1190 memorial space, with potential for a future memorial subject to other unknown funding. I am requesting reinstatement of the 1190 Memorial Garden to properly respect the history of this important site, explain what happened here, and also as a place that shows that in York we move forward together. As a multifunctional space, it should be a commemoration for those who died here in 1190, a proper reflective space for those who wish to pray and quietly think, an informed functional space where school and tour groups can learn about Clifford's Tower and its history, a focal space for the annual Clifford's Tower commemoration event, and a quiet seating area for all provided in a designated landscaped hard space where large numbers of people can sit and stand off the main walkways, overlooking Clifford's Tower and away from the main children's play area. So a peaceful space for all, including older people, to sit and relax. We proposed that the 1190 Memorial Garden be expanded to include something currently missing from our city. There is currently no Peace Garden in York, and where better to site it than here at the heart of our city's former castle and the historic atrocities, to provide a new welcoming space where people can sit and also learn of our city's values together. Today, we are an interfaith city and city of sanctuary, where we regularly stand together against religious intolerance, racism and hate. With clear information about our past and our future, this 1190 Memorial / Peace Garden can tell our history and how we learn from it, to encourage all who live and visit York to make it one city for all. This would provide perfect symmetry of the past and what we stand for in York for our future. I would ask you to reconsider the priorities for the current application and the first phase of implementation, to reinstate the Memorial Garden, cited in lieu of part of the swathe, and if funds are needed for this,
3 minutes that you've had now.
then the circular path could be deferred to a later phase when wider traffic considerations can be more easily resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments, and they will be absolutely considered under that item. I'm sure the executive members will make comment as well at the time. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Councillor Rose, and he is here to speak to us on multiple agenda items. So 3 minutes, Councillor Rose, and make sure that, yeah, very good. The microphone is by the side of you. Would you like me to give you 30 seconds? You're okay. Okay, please go ahead.
This is probably the most exciting executive meeting in years. There are monumental pieces of work in the anti-poverty strategy, neighbourhood model, numerous prospectus items, the Clifford's Tower area plans, the CIL, and much more. And obscured by the big things are many smaller improvements for residents. For instance, in the Acomb area alone, we have work at Acomb Library, Energise, Westfield School, Hob Moor, Lowfield, the multi-use games area, street lighting renewals, active travel schemes, a great places plan, and parts of the city's largest ever highways resurfacing programme. This is the real substance of what the council does alongside social care. It's really big stuff, so I'm slightly sad to see only 2 articles about these papers across our local press. There is so much in here that York residents don't know about that benefit them. And these positives are despite the greatest pressures on council finances yet, with numerous local authorities struggling to do more than statutory services. Councillors and residents might all be tired of hearing about continued hard choices, and complacency could set in due to continually rising to that challenge, but we do need to know how tough things are. And this paper outlines that the fair funding review might make things worse for us. I know you have been working hard on this already, so please do keep applying that pressure on the government to make things better for our residents. We get so little per capita, we have pockets of deprivation and poverty across the city, and we know that council tax is uneven across the country and that visitor and student numbers aren't properly accounted for. And we still need Westminster to give us powers for implementing a tourist tax, limiting holiday lets and out-of-town taxis, running our public buses, and much more. I personally really want to spend less time talking about finances and a small handful of hot button topics and more time talking about that deep well of great news. For that, we need the government to improve our finances. Sadly, we also need fewer issues like this Christmas anti-terror item as well. The Human Rights Act Article 2 doesn't mean spending all money eliminating every potential risk to life. If we did that, we'd never spend money on culture and people wouldn't be allowed to drive cars near any pavements. It's about the appropriate balance. The police has its view on balance, but the role of the police prevents true neutrality and means that they can see balance differently to human rights groups and others. The council routinely weighs up all rights for all residents for this very reason. One area of concern is that the risk assessment in Annex C puts the chance of an attack in our city due to a blue badge holder or someone impersonating one at roughly 50-50. Now, I can't see the confidential information underpinning this assessment, and neither can the public. And that makes it really hard for anyone to feel assured that it's proportionate, on top of the concept feeling quite insulting to many disabled people. If the information available to you gives you confidence that this is necessary, fair enough. Improvements, including starting at 10:30, takes the edge off that slightly, even though they're expensive. But for me, the true cost is blocking many thousands of our residents from using our city centre during the year's busiest retail and banking season, and that cost is too high. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Thank you for those comments, and we'll consider them later. Thank you for joining us. And then finally, we have Andrew Lowson, who is here to speak to us again on agenda item 8, Major Projects, Castle and Eye of York Update Report and Next Steps. So 3 minutes. Andrew, would you like me to give you 30-second warning?
I should be 2 minutes and 51 seconds, apparently.
Very good. So I won't then in that case. Thanks. Please go ahead.
Okay, before talking on Castle Gateway, I'd just briefly like to mention 3 things in regard to council matters. Firstly, many thanks for the support on the recent bid ballot, where we've received a strong mandate for another 5 years. The welcome news of an appointment of a new chief executive, something the business community have talked about and wanted to see, and the emergence of the new public realm being revealed at the station frontage. Fantastic for residents, and it's great. It's going to be a great first impression for visitors. So in regard to Castle Gateway, I'll be honest and say there's still a little bit of nervousness just from within some of the business community about how the removal of Castle Car Park will affect the footfall on the city. I've sat on the steering committee for many years, and some of those original mitigations, such as the multi-storey car park on St George's, the link bridge for Castle Mills, the new event space, those all have been removed from the scheme. This does link, I suppose, to the wider conversation on car parking and accessibility to the city. The spend data we're getting, collectively, and some of the anecdotes we're getting from businesses points that local spend is down since April. And this is something we'll look to bring to the attention of the executive in the upcoming car parking consultation. From a bid perspective, we do welcome the ambitions behind the Castle and the Eye of York project. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reshape one of our city's most important historic areas, to make it greener and also more welcoming. The businesses who support this project are hopeful it will drive footfall and dwell time, especially around that Coppergate area. Can we please ask that the progress on this project is also balanced with practicality? In relation to the closure of Castle Car Park, the report makes it clear this will remove about 268 spaces, with the mitigation focused on the Coppergate multi-storey. I'd like to stress how vital it is that the Coppergate improvements are completed and fully operational before any closure takes place. Those upgrades, such as better signage, extended hours, are not just cosmetic. They are essential to make Coppergate a generally attractive alternative, safe and convenient environment. Until those measures are in place, if Castle Car Park was removed, it could risk creating some pressures on accessibility and also undermine some confidence in the wider project. Linking to my earlier point as well, I must also express the disappointment that the proposed footbridge linking Castle Mills and Eye of York have been removed from the scheme. That bridge was never simply just about convenience, it was about connectivity, encouraging footfall to flow naturally between Piccadilly, Fossgate, Warmgate, and also the new Castle development. So I'd urge the council and its partners to ensure that the footbridge remains firmly built into the Castle Mills development plans. We do believe the long-term success of the whole master plan depends on that seamless access and movement across the Foss. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, and thanks for your comments on all of those aspects and the support that you gave initially at the beginning of your speech. So well done for the bid results, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. Thanks very much. Right, so that is the end of our public participation section. And everybody's comments will be considered in the item that they spoke on. So thank you for joining us today. It's really helpful for us to hear those views and pointers. So our next item then is item number 6, which is the forward plan. Can I see those in favour of the forward plan as it stands? Thank you. So that's unanimously approved. And then item number 7 is York Christmas Market 2025 operation of temporary anti-terrorism traffic regulation order. And we have Gary Taylor and Ben Murphy here to speak to us on this. So please take a seat. And Gary, are you going to start and then Ben, or the other Ben's going to speak first? Okay. Thank you for joining us this evening. So Ben Murphy is Head of City Development and he's going to speak to us on this paper as a starting point. Please go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, just to really briefly introduce the paper. Obviously, in October last month, the Executive approved the principle of introducing the Anti-Terrorism Traffic Regulation Order following the recommendation from Chief Constable at North Yorkshire Police. Also agreed a further report on the need, risk mitigation across the various forms of access that have been permitted in previous years. So this report before you today sets out that additional detail, reflects a very active discussion with North Yorkshire Police, counter-terrorism colleagues as well, and Make It York over the last month. The report sets out, as referenced already by speakers, the updated agreed approach of deferring commencement of the market and the vehicle restrictions to 10:30 from the 10 a.m. originally proposed, limiting its impact. It also considers all the various forms of road usage which have been permitted in previous years, some of which are essential to the safe operation of the city centre and the market, such as waste and emergency utilities. Others provide critical community-facing services as well. So in line with the police recommendations, we're also putting in place measures for, or suggesting putting in place of measures for towing of illegally parked vehicles on the public highway, and we need to make provision for that. Across those various road users permitted in previous years, we've looked in the first instance to manage out the need for vehicular access through revised operational approaches. This has been possible in the majority of cases. Where that hasn't been the case, though, we've sought to tightly control the numbers of vehicles accessing the centre and agree with police and colleagues and put in place additional control measures to mitigate these risks as set out in the confidential Annex D. There are cases, though, where limiting and controlling individual vehicular access is very challenging, and it's not been possible to agree with partners an approach to meaningfully managing down those risks. In those cases, there is a package of mitigation recommended in the report to be put in place for those road users, including the creation of additional blue badge dedicated parking at Duncan Place, provision of support for free mobility aid hire from Shop Mobility, and comprehensive information sharing and online resource signposting. Members will note as well that there are cost implications associated with all of that in the order of £102,000, and a conversation with Make It York ongoing around that cost sharing. And importantly, the report also proposes that early in 2026, a further review is brought back looking at the overall impact, benefit and cost of the market, its current format and the strategic case associated with this and other large-scale city centre events. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ben. Gary, do you want to say anything at this point?
Only in the context that this probably needs to be given as a status quo for all events. So in the context of that report coming back, we need to look at the context of the whole city operating model during the whole year, not just applicable to the Christmas event.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask you to outline the process that you have gone through with the police and their structures since we made the decision to enact the ATRO in October, so that we understand that essentially the ATRO came into or was agreed then what it looked like and what the process is you've been through with them and why we end up where we are today. Thank you.
If I lead off, and Ben, if you can come in if I've missed anything out. So there's been numerous meetings since the last decision in October at multiple levels, from sort of right through from bronze through to gold command, with the police force, but also engaging at a national level in terms of specialists, anti-terrorism advice. So we've had to go through each elemental part in terms of accessibility, in terms of each vehicle, with starting the premise that there is no vehicles allowed into the HVM zone. And walk through in context in very, very granular detail the scenario of each of the specific vehicles that were allowed in last year, in terms of how we could potentially mitigate risk, which led to the sort of the position we're in terms of the free vehicular elemental parts that we will be proposing to allow in and is recommended here in terms of those mitigations. And fundamentally, the only vehicles that are being allowed in are those that are fully staffed, so from a known staffed organisation, where they are fully vetted accordingly through the relevant process and procedures, that there's a fully known individual and they're able to present their staffing ID, and that vehicles are either chaperoned or staffed at all times, including our own. In terms of our own vehicle, we have put mitigations in to ensure in terms of enablisation and stuff. So there is a whole raft of other measures that are obviously in the other papers that are in place also. So those vehicles that we are unable to recommend, and bear in mind in this context, it's a recommendation. This is our ATRO, so it's a recommendation from the police constable. Are those where we're unable to fulfil all of those elemental parts, and where we haven't had a positive response in terms of that wider dialogue with the group, because those areas introduce an element of risk that, unfortunately, at this stage, we're unable to recommend for the reasons outlined within the report.
Thank you. So, am I right to conclude then that if the police hadn't been comfortable with the approach for each of these vehicle movements, that they would have been very clear about that, and it would have put the functioning of the event in the format that it is at the moment in jeopardy?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely, it's the case, and at one point, my recommendation would more than likely been that the event couldn't take place because we weren't able to actually facilitate some of the key movements within the space, and particularly the waste collection. I mean, the city centre in itself can't operate without waste collection, never mind all the additionality we're bringing in with the market and also the Christmas period. So we would have been able to operate the event, never mind in terms of the safety elements, it just wouldn't have been operable.
Thank you. And can you tell me where the vehicle movement numbers were last year? It was some astronomical number, wasn't it, when the market vehicles, traders were allowed through the HVM, and where we're at now, our expectation, understanding that emergency vehicles could go in, but we don't know that, and we'll have to accommodate it. But what do we expect the vehicle movements to be on a daily basis?
Chair, I don't have those figures. I mean, there were significant numbers, but they were nearly all traders. And we actually started out already with a decision that we wouldn't be allowing traders to move until after the event period completed. There was very, very small numbers of any of the vehicles, including Blue Badge, during last year. We're only expecting probably less than half a dozen of vehicle movements during that period. And that will only be for the elemental parts set out here, or if there are specific emergency movements required from emergency vehicles, or if they were, for example, a major utility issue or such like. But there'll be very few movements, hopefully none, in the sense that other than the Royal Mail and Boots are set out here.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anybody else have any other questions at all? No, can I see those who'd like to speak on this item then, please? Okay, thank you. Councillor Eyre, do you want to go ahead? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'll start by reflecting on this is the second time, which I don't think is satisfactory, that we've been given a paper probably less than 24 hours before the meeting, which doesn't give the public or opposition members or backbench members such as Councillor Rose at any time to actually read through and get through the details of this. I did notice on my way in to the office today that the signs were already up for 10:30 announcements for the market, so it does seem as if the decision has been slightly preempted. I think we have always, as an administration, when we were in power, had always followed expert advice, and I think that's important. We've always said we've been consistent throughout. I think some of the cases have made that the absence of threat and the absence of any particular instance does not mean that there is no particular threat. In many ways, the absence of incident and the absence of threat shows that in some way we've been very proactive in terms of mitigating some of the risks we face. I think there was unfair criticism in the past about vehicles that would be allowed and vehicles that would not be allowed within this period when blue badges were not permitted. And it's good to see this paper confirm the previous position pre-2023 about the very different circumstances about waste vehicles, for example, about Royal Mail vehicles and their differences and their key differences between those and blue badge access. I think I do have some concerns around the financial issues in the paper. I think the suggestion that Make It York could find £102,000 at this time of the year in terms of finding the cost mitigations. I think the comments at the last meeting threatening the Christmas market were particularly unhelpful and did destabilise a lot of our partners, businesses, and cause great amounts of concern. I'm glad this report does actually start to step back on some of those threats about cancelling the market, but I think it's wholly unfair for the decisions of this administration to be passed entirely on to Make It York to try and find those costs. I think my general point around this on the brief time I have is that I keep coming back to the fact that all of this was known going back to pre-2023. Nothing has changed. The police confirmed at the last meeting their advice has been consistent and has never changed all the way through this. It appears that this administration has been dragged reluctantly to the position the council was already in pre-2023. I think this has always been a matter of safety. As I said last time, this should never have been politicised. The police advice is clear. We should adhere to that advice, and the officers have said they were given two choices to recommend either following the police advice or cancelling the Christmas market. It's not a political issue, it's a matter of safety, and we should be going ahead and listening to what the police have to say.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lomas, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you for that. In looking at this paper and reading all the information, and in reflecting on the position that we were in at our previous meeting where we agreed on the ATRO, I was thinking about last year, and I was thinking about the discussion we had last year, a little bit earlier than this, but the discussion we had about access to the city centre during the Christmas markets. And last year, we said that we would make an exemption for blue badge holders to allow them into the foot streets areas between 5 and 7 p.m, because all the data showed us that those periods of time were the quieter periods of time in the Christmas markets. And we, balancing all of the information that we had, we made that decision that that was an appropriate thing to do. And in fact, we intended to do that this year as well, because there was no new information that showed us any different, that anything that would change that balance from last year. And we were going to do that until we received the Chief Constable's letter just before that decision was due. And I think it's important to also reflect on the work that happened between making that decision last year and then considering it again this year. Consideration of doing the market differently, consideration of all the risks and benefits of the market. And with the information available to us, we believed that we were going to be making a similar decision to last year. But then we did receive the Chief Constable's letter, and that put us in what I believe is an impossible situation. And we now have had to consider how to mitigate the harm that we know following the Chief Constable's gravely serious advice will cause. And I'm grateful to officers for doing that at a phenomenal pace between the last meeting and this meeting, to work to find out what can be done, what can we do, how can we limit the harm that we know we're about to cause. And I just want to make a note about exemptions that officers have discussed. These are really limited cases, and I want to be clear, they're for very specific deliveries. It's not ordinary stock deliveries to a shop that we're talking about here. We're also talking about an immobilised waste vehicle that won't be moved at all until after the Foot Streets hours. And the advice of the Chief Constable is that no other traffic can be tolerated within the HVM zone. That is the advice we're following. But I also reflect that to present this as a choice is difficult because it doesn't feel very much like a choice. When you're faced with such an extreme move by the Chief Constable, we have very little choice because we do take our responsibilities seriously. And that means we take our responsibility to keep people as safe as possible seriously, but we also take seriously our responsibilities to properly weigh and balance risks with the impact of the decisions we might make to limit those risks. We have listened to all advice by experts, including the Chief Constable, but also including the advice of human rights experts. It's no secret that threat and risk are all around us, and it's also no secret that the measures we as a society take to address those risks have an impact on all of our lives. In this case, however, the people most impacted by those measures are disabled people who need to use a vehicle to access their city centre. And I stress there the word need. This is not about people who can use a different way to get into the city centre but prefer to use a vehicle. This is people who, if they're not able to drive into the very, very limited part of the foot streets that is accessible to blue badge holders, cannot access the city centre. And it's not just about their access to the Christmas market, it's their access to all other shops, services and leisure facilities within the city centre area. And we know the impact that exclusion has on disabled people. We know that because they told us repeatedly about it during the permanent ban on them that was imposed by the previous Lib Dem Green administration. And we chose to listen to them. We listened and we balanced the risks to all involved in making decisions about access to our city centre. I am very grateful to the officers, as I said, for the work that they've done to review what can be done now, here and now, in the next several weeks, to make our city centre as accessible and safe as possible during the Christmas market. And I am grateful to officers for including a recommendation in this report for a further report to properly review the operation of our city centre and all events that happen within it. We cannot continue to knowingly discriminate against disabled people. We cannot continue to harm them by excluding them from their city centre for extended periods of time during the year. And I want to say to disabled people who might be watching this or may hear about it afterwards, that we will continue to listen to you. We want to hear what you have to say on this. We are put in an impossible position by what we are being asked to decide today. And on this occasion, we have no choice. But in future, we will be working to make sure that any exclusion of anyone from our city is as minimal as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas and Councillor Kilbane. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. To be honest, I've not got a great deal to add to what Councillor Lomas has so very eloquently spelt out in terms of this decision-making process. Just to reflect that I was getting a train up from King's Cross up to York last night, looking at the increased security that was present at certainly around King's Cross station, and a little bit of nervousness that was around because of the knife attack that occurred earlier in the week. And of course, you know, our admiration goes out to all the staff of LNER who were so heroic in preventing what could have been a much worse situation, to all the passengers on the train who equally were in a horrendous place, but responded remarkably. And hopefully the human spirit will eventually triumph. But, you know, it brought home how very real these threats are from whatever the cause. And of course, one of the things we need to take into account when we're making our decisions is the Terrorism Protection of Premises Act, which is also known as Martin's Law, which followed on from the terrible suicide bombing at the Manchester Arena and the devastating impacts that had on many, many families, including those in York. And we do have to take all of those threats into account as we make these difficult decisions. And, you know, politics sometimes is about making very difficult decisions. I think in many respects, you know, the easy decision is just to say, oh, well, we'll just try and stop everything from happening. We'll ban blue badges from the city centre for 365 days a year. And we've dealt with that. But that's not a position that we will ever put our residents in. We will always try to balance the risk versus people being able to go about their everyday lives, all people being able to do that, and all people having access to their city. And they are very difficult decisions. And I think, you know, we keep on being told by the police, amongst others, that this is our decision. But what changed this year was that the Chief Constable requested an ATRO. And as soon as that request has been put in, we are left with no choice at all. The choice that we are making is a formality, because it would be wrong for us to go against that request from the Chief Constable. So it's not so much a Hobson's choice as no choice at all. And I thank the officers for all the work that they've done to bring in as many mitigations as possible. One, so that the city can continue to function, because it wouldn't just be the Christmas market that couldn't function if there was a total ban on vehicle movements in the city centre, but the city centre wouldn't be able to function at all. And to make the best of what is a bad job because of the world that we find ourselves living in. But I think we do have to, at some point, if we're brave politicians, assess the risk and balance the risk and say, where are we sat here? And we will never be in the position that Councillor Eyre has just spelt out that the Liberal Democrats are in, which is that it's the Christmas market and business above all else. And if people can't access it, then, you know, that's kind of just tough. It's not an either or. It's always a balance, and we'll find a way. Councillor Eyre also seems to be unaware that we actually own Make It York, that it is at arm's length, but nonetheless an arm of the council, and why you wouldn't have those conversations about cost recovery is quite frankly beyond me. And actually the assertion that you made that nothing had changed, well, it was right in some respects, because the risks that we were informed of hadn't changed from the decision that we made last year, and that's why we were proceeding with the same decision again for this year. But what did change, and it's extremely disingenuous, and it is playing politics of Councillor Eyre, to say that nothing had changed. Clearly something had changed. There was an ATRO request that came in from the police Chief Constable, and that's what we've been dealing with since. So this is not a decision that we're 100% happy with, but it is one that we need to make. From this, we will go on to see what we can do to make sure our city remains accessible to all of its residents and visitors in the years ahead, whether that's for the Christmas market or all the other great events that go on. Because what we will not do is stop putting on events that attracts people, that brings people together to joyfully celebrate our communities, in spite of the risks that we face when doing so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kilbane. And then I would finally like to say that I think both Councillor Kilbane and Councillor Lomas have covered the issue very thoroughly. But essentially what this situation puts us in is a position where we must look at how our city operates. We are very committed to not excluding our residents from elements of their city. To me, that is a highly important aspect, and it needs to be balanced against all the other considerations. And I will not step back from the fact that I have had to say that we will consider how the Christmas market functions, and if it can't accommodate all of our residents, then it needs to function differently, and we need to find a way of doing that. And we will be starting that work as soon as we possibly can in early 2026, and this report actually goes into that. So all considerations need to be on the table, and as politicians, I am glad that we consider all options and we try to find balance, and we do not make black and white decisions as the previous administration did, and apparently Councillor Eyre would like to do now as well. So I will commit to the city. We are looking at different ways of doing this, and it will be an absolute focus in that early part of 2026 with partners, with business, with our disabled community, and with our officers and the police and counter-terrorism to make this work, because it must. We cannot go on like this every year. So on that basis, as we have already discussed, there is effectively no choice to be made here. If the Christmas market is to go ahead as it has been planned, then we need to approve the mitigations that the officers have worked so hard to work through with the police on their recommendation and their advice as well, and approval. And those are on page 7 and 8 of the agenda pack, the addendum, the late report, as outlined at paragraph 18. And I recommend approval for all of these. So that says, following the decision at October 2025 executive to make the ATRO on the recommendation of the Chief Constable of North Yorkshire Police, executive is recommended to 1, agree the publication and implementation of the York City Centre Anti-Terrorism Temporary Traffic Restrictions Order 2025, which is Annex A and B to the report. 2, note the risk assessment at Annex C of the report and agree the operational protocols to the scheme summarised at paragraphs 31 to 36 and included at confidential Annex D to the report, and the approach to excluding vehicular access set out at paragraphs 37 to 42 of the report. Agree that any minor amendments to the arrangements be delegated to the Director of City Development in consultation with the leader, and to agree with North Yorkshire Police. 3, agree the risk and impact mitigation package summarised at paragraphs 31 to 42, and in respect of risk mitigation measures included at confidential Annex D of the report. 4, approve a temporary change of the Council's policy on vehicle clamping and removals to enable the removal of vehicles parked in the protected area within the HVM during event hours immediately after a penalty charge notice, PCN, has been issued, as waiting and loading will be temporarily suspended in accordance with statutory guidance for local authorities in England on civil enforcement of parking contraventions. 5, acknowledge the forecast additional costs of £102,000 to support the recommendations 2 and 3, and to seek to recover these costs, except where they relate to discretionary impact mitigation measures from event operator Make It York. And 6, agree to receive a future report early in 2026 reviewing the strategic case for and ongoing delivery arrangements associated with the Christmas market and other significant footfall city centre events. Can I see those who are approving those recommendations? Thank you. So that is approved unanimously. Thank you everybody to that, and thank you to Ben and Gary for your extensive work on this, and we will be talking about this very soon, I'm sure. So thank you for joining us today. Right, okay, so back to the main pack. Agenda item 8 is major projects, Castle and Eye of York update report. and next steps. And so that is Ben and Gary again. So Ben, would you like to introduce this paper to us? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, I'll be brief. The Castle and I project forms a central part of the Castle Gateway Master Plan, which has been a long-standing development aspiration for the council and partners for many, many years. We've been working very closely with partners, including the advisory group, some of whose members are here with us today. Transformation of the space from surface car park to a cherished community asset will drive footfall and increase city centre dwell time. It will enhance the setting of nationally important heritage assets, improve environmental resilience within the area, and provide important community and stakeholder amenities in a culturally sensitive location. It'll also act as a catalyst for the wider ambitions of the Castle Gateway Master Plan. So, following direction from November 2023 executive to reframe the project slightly to make it deliverable within budget envelopes, to retain blue badge parking within the space, and to provide flexible green space, including children's play space, we've worked hard and closely with all of those stakeholders and the advisory group as well, as I say, to work through revised scheme details that were submitted to planning in July. So the report summarises this work and seeks approval for the next steps to allow delivery of the scheme. As with all transformative city centre regeneration schemes, the project's not without its challenges. So speakers have mentioned already the loss of car parking, in particular the 268 spaces at Castle Car Park, will have an impact on this centre of the city, this sector of the city rather. But technical analysis and transport work summarised at Annex 2 and in the report itself demonstrates sufficient capacity across the remaining car parks to accommodate this residual demand. With investment in sustainable transport, including overnight parking at Park and Ride as well, this will play an important role in meeting that demand and maintaining that footfall. Loss of car parking will impact council revenue as well, as highlighted in the report. So as part of the works, we're now proposing a £200,000 package of improvements to Coppergate Car Park, form part of the works, so that we can make best use of this asset for our communities. And finally, whilst the delivery costs have been significantly reduced from those a number of years ago to £9.934 million now in total, including hostile vehicle mitigation measures coming out through the planning process, there is a need for up to £1.5 million worth of funding to deliver the whole scheme with the existing budgets available. This forms part of the prospectus, which is on the agenda tonight at item 15, and a fallback position to that is also identified. So members are recommended to approve the essential next steps to move us into delivery on this transformative project, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ben. Gary, do you want to say anything at this point? Okay, does anybody have any questions? Want to speak on this item? Okay, Councillor O, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I welcome the comments from the public speakers. I think, as they've said, this is nowhere near close to what we should have been delivering. I think it is important to reflect that following the elections in 2023, you inherited a shovel-ready scheme, and most importantly, without the multi-storey car park, a fully funded scheme with zero cost to the taxpayer. 2.5 years later, progress on delivery has been backward, and the cost to the taxpayer has gone through the roof. Today, you've been asked to sign up to potential borrowing of £9 million. That's almost £750,000 of taxpayers' money each year, unnecessarily siphoned from much-needed services to fund the scheme. When you factor in the lost income from car parking, that figure grows to nearer £1.5 million a year. What do taxpayers get in return? As ever with this administration, it's less for more. The short-sighted loss of public event space will hamstring our economy for decades to come. The issues at last executive and here tonight put in stark light just how poor that decision is. There's no new bridge connection across the Foss. The new bridge across the Foss was expected to carry 3,000 pedestrians a day. Councillor Kilbane told Scrutiny he would absolutely deliver the bridge. Another broken promise from Labour. For those reasons alone, you should be thinking long and hard about your choices. Elsewhere tonight, we will hear about the financial pressures facing the council, with government doubling our budget gap to £30 million over the next few years. You want to hear today add another £1.5 million to that pressure. There are numerous other reasons to be cautious of the recommendations. I don't think I've ever seen a report to a council committee, let alone one suggesting millions of pounds of borrowing and lost income, based on evidence described by our own officers as, quote, very crude. When Councillor Kilbane called in a previous decision in 2021, he stated the 74-page strategic review of parking was not sufficiently detailed. Even officers are struggling to defend the 10 pages presented here. I'm not sure city centre businesses represented here today will be entirely reassured by the fact that our evidence is based on unsubstantiated modelling and the observation of staff in parking services during informal discussions. The report states the assessment is based on, quote, limited demand information and time available to interpret it. You've had 3 years, nearly. Nothing here mentions our stated council policy to remove all non-essential travel from the city centre. The case for this paper sits entirely on redirecting motorists to car parks within the very area we are seeking to restrict access, Stonebow and Piccadilly. Both are multi-storey car parks, which this administration has criticised as being unsuitable for disabled and vulnerable residents. Both require barrier access to enter and exit, which is particularly difficult for the disabled, something totally missing from the EIA. In 2.5 years since cancelling the multi-storey car park, your reverse Midas touch has turned £11.2 million of profit to this council into £9 million of borrowing, with no spades in the ground, no planning permission for new homes, no bridge, and a transport strategy in tatters. In summary, basically, you're delivering none of the benefits that were proposed and all of the costs for taxpayers.
I will hand back to officers in a moment, but it's very interesting to me to hear your comments, given the positivity that came through scrutiny from your members, Councillor Eyre. I just the two do not match at all, let alone the inaccuracies of what you have just said. Can I ask Ben and Gary to correct any factual inaccuracies, please, that you can? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the new capital borrowing as opposed to what was committed in the prior scheme against this particular scheme. So there's page 53, paragraph 59 breaks out the financial elements of the scheme. So there was already committed WICA funding. So there's also already committed funding from CYC, some of which was moved into York out of Ring Road. So there's a smaller amount committed than was prior to that. So the actual new borrowing element that we're requiring here is £1.5 million, as identified in paragraph 57.
Councillor Eyre, you've had your opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nobody has called you anything.
Future, I'm just presenting the facts I've set out here. So there is additional borrowing, that's correct, and there is additional revenue, which is correct. The implications are that, and we have taken a worst case scenario, and just reflecting in terms of the parking data, myself and my officers can only work on the data the council collects, and it doesn't actually have specific data relating to specific car parks. We don't have that information. So we've extrapolated that in the best means we can, which reflects, and it's probably the most conservative version of doing that, which reflects on the figures we've already got in terms of the payments we've got through the year, the use that we know exists in January, and also we do know there's a direct correlation between our park and ride and also the number of people that use our parking as in the city centre. So we know there is a direct correlation of that throughout the year, because actually that is just demand for the city centre. So, and then we've used the worst case scenario and then identifying what the worst case revenue implications of that would be. It may actually be much better, fundamentally, as in, because for most of the year we know our car parks actually have quite significant capacity, Coppergate specifically. We also know there are peak times, Christmas market period, summer period, as we know, where a lot of our car parks is utilised, particularly on a Friday and Saturday. Our entire strategy is actually, and they are nearly all visitors to the city, and a large influx, particularly in terms of tourism. And our entire strategy is to move that to park and ride and to reduce the impact that has on our local network, in our local transport plan. So that does correlate also strategically with our strategic approach, as in during those peak times, we're wanting people to use park and ride. We are also, as a part of that strategic approach, in investing, as already been presented to exec, the 4 million in terms of improving the quality of the park and ride, and also increasing the number of park and ride in terms of later on in the evening and overnight. So I think as a part of a package overall, whilst we're talking about a whole city here, so no one's ever going to be able to present something of a model that presents an actual, I think the facts that are in here and the position we've taken in terms of what we're presenting in terms of worst case scenarios, and given the alignment to our strategic approach and given the benefits this brings to the city in terms of presenting a new urban park, and we know those benefits are not just, they'll be to residents, they'll be to the quality of place, and also wider benefits, as we know, in terms of the environment, as presented in terms of scrutiny, in terms of that urban oasis and quality of place, and also setting of that space. So what we're bringing here in terms of the recommendations, given that weight and given the information we've got, there is a significant benefit to the city in the longer term in terms of what we're presenting as the preferred option.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre, can you go through the chair, please? Or leave? You come through the chair or you leave?
For you, Chair, I mean, the whole cost is about 10 million, 9.934. The actual borrowing isn't, there is WICA funding that comes from WICA. There's funding from the already allocating, so that cost of borrowing is already allowed for in the, all those elements are already allowed for and have been allowed for a number of years. They're not new. The only new element is the 1.5. That's all.
And
that's all
the last case scenario, as in we're looking for external funding first, and that's the last case scenario. Thank you for that. Councillor Lomas, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. First, I want to say that I'm really grateful to public speakers and also to all of the members of the public and businesses and everyone else who has engaged over an extended period of time in the evolution of the Castle Gateway plans. And it has been an evolution of plans. And of course, we have significantly changed the plans. We have removed the completely inappropriate building of a multi-storey car park in the city centre, because that doesn't fit with either our transport strategy or what any council should be doing in the modern age, encouraging more cars into our city centre, not fewer. And I am really pleased that we've moved from a park that was essentially a paved area to a park that is actually green and contains trees and sustainable planting and things that we know we need in our city centre to ameliorate the harm of those vehicles that still do come into the city centre, to deal with the flood risk that we know we face as a city, to give people in the city centre family-friendly green space, to help them to enjoy our beautiful city even better, to help families to come, to visit, to stay, to do more in our city. And I'm really pleased that we've been able to find a way to move forward on the scheme. And I know that some of the additional costs are because of HVN measures, which we have had to include on the advice of security experts because of this space being a space for gathering and the improvements to Coppergate car park. And I'm really grateful to all of the feedback that we got from scrutiny on the measures that we were taking around mitigating the loss of car parking. And I note that we are retaining blue badge parking in a space that is the closest to the majority of the city centre that we can get a space for significant numbers of car parking spaces. And I'm very attuned to the sensitivity of that place, not only Clifford's Tower, but also the prisons and the working Crown Court on the site, and the difficult history of that area. And I'm really pleased that the designs are sensitive to it. And of course, there's always more that we could do. And there are always design choices that some people prefer over other choices. And of course, there's always so much more we could do if we were to be reckless enough to borrow however many millions of pounds Councillor Eyre thinks that we're going to borrow. But we have to do this in a way that is sustainable all round. And I'm certain that we can find ways to include in the design all of the elements that I know that Louise and Lillian have referred to, including a space for quiet reflection, a space to think. And I think that so many of us would appreciate spaces like that in our city centre. But obviously, I do want to address the comments made by Councillor Eyre about borrowing, because I got lost in the middle of that, adding 2 and 2 and making 9 million. But it is clear in the paper that we have WICA funding that is going to almost, well, pretty much half of this project is being funded by WICA funding. And the funding from CYC is already in the capital programme, and the costs of borrowing that are included in the capital programme. And so that is not new borrowing. It's not extra money every year. And the only additional borrowing that may have to be done is £1.5 million, only if we cannot find that from external sources. And as we will come to talk about, we have a prospectus that makes sure we are ready to make use of any sources of external funding that possibly might come our way, because we all remember the finance mantra of this council, which is we can do great things, and we can do many great things as long as we can find somebody else to pay for them. And it's great to see that embodied in this. We are going to find ways to do great things, but we are realistic about what we ourselves can fund. So I apart from that minor niggle, I'm really pleased by the response to these new plans, both from the public, through scrutiny, from the cross-party scrutiny contributions that we got, and really happy to see something happening.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Do you want to come in, Councillor Kilbane?
Sure, yeah, thank you, Chair. And it is a shame that this councillor has chosen to drag this down into dirty party politics, because it neglects the and starts to override the contributions of everybody that's worked on this project, and not least the contributions from our public speakers tonight. So I want to start by addressing their concerns, then I'll deal with the politics and come back to the project. Yes, we absolutely hear you. I know that you've been involved through the whole consultation. What we have here is in many ways a sort of a blank page is what we're building. It will be a quiet place. It will be a restful place. I understand that it doesn't satisfy all of what you would like to see out of the project, but what I would say to you is that this is not the end of the road. The space will provide future developments as appropriate and as funding allows. But you know, as you alluded to, the area does have to fulfil many functions, and we're mindful of all of those. Now, I'll come back to those in the end, but I just wanted to say, before I deal with the dirty politics side of it, if you like, that we do hear you and take your concerns very seriously, and take your ideas on board. They haven't been discarded. They're just definitely not in this iteration. But who knows what the future will hold, depending on funding. In terms of the politics, I don't know why you're surprised, Chair, that Councillor Eyre's views are at odds with those of his members on scrutiny, because I find these days Councillor Eyre's views are at odds with most of his members most of the time. as you sit there watching them all squirm behind him in full council, burying their heads, thinking, did he really just say that? And actually, we also find that Councillor Ayres' views are frequently at odds with Councillor Widdowson's views when she attends on his behalf of these meetings, where she is frequently far more positive, with, of course, due level of criticism and scrutiny. Sadly, Councillor Ayres' main project here tonight seems to be to try and grab a headline or two with his baffling maths. And he thinks somehow the journalists will be hoodwinked into running the story. It hasn't worked so far. I don't see any reason why it would work in the future. Our journalists are not stupid and can see exactly what he is trying to do. I was very surprised to discover that Councillor is keen on closing Coppergate car park. Which took me by surprise. It's definitely a change in position to be speaking against the use of that and other car parks, and that's one that I guess we'll see how that develops as Liberal Democrat policy. Well, I do wholeheartedly agree with him, is that it was frankly very difficult to lose the bridge. You know, the bridge was integral to the project and we really wanted it to happen. But the costs of it just escalated, and a lot of those costs were due to the sensitive nature of the wildlife that's in that area. So it wasn't just the bridge, it was the connecting boardwalk that we would have to put in as well. Would have had a disturbing effect on some very significant wildlife in the middle of York. And this project is about reconnecting with nature, not destroying it. So until we've got a way that we can, one, make sure that we don't damage that wildlife, and two, have the funding for the bridge, then we won't be proceeding with it, though it does remain an ambition. But, you know, when you're actually delivering projects on the ground, you have to cut your cloth. You know, when we came into administration, we found a whole load of bells and whistles and projects and schemes that were going to go ahead, but we also found a whole backlog of schemes like Lendl Bridge that had been put off and put off and put off, knowing that they weren't going to be in power following the election and wouldn't have to deal with it. And now they've all just backlogged up. And of course, what we found was a team that was not equipped to deal with. We had plenty of great officers, but they were all square pegs in round holes. We didn't have the right officers to deliver the schemes that you were all stacking up, because the truth of the matter is your schemes were just for headlines. They weren't actually for delivery, whereas all of the residents of York can now see what is happening on the ground. They can see what's happening outside the front of the station. They can see what's happening at York Central. They can see the pedestrian bridge going in. They can see that it's actually the Labour administration that does actually start to deliver on the ground, instead of just constantly chasing headlines. So, you know, I don't think that's an argument that we need to get into because the people can see it with their own eyes. So just finally, just thank you to all of the officers, and, you know, praise to Gary and Ben, but it's more than them that have been working on this project. So thanks to all of the officers who've worked on it so far. In terms of the site, its importance cannot be underestimated. Obviously, both has been so eloquently pointed out to the Jewish community of the world, but also to the history of Yorkshire and the history of England. So it is the Eye of York. It is the centre of the historic centre of Yorkshire, where the three ridings meet. It is the reason why York is the capital of Yorkshire. It is one of the reasons why York is the most important city in Yorkshire, and we need to make sure that we do celebrate that. But its history is very checkered. You know, it was one of the bases for William the Conqueror's harrying of the north, along with the other motte and bale that he built on the other side of the river, where he came up and basically, according to some records, wiped out 75% of the population that lived, the indigenous population that lived in the north at the time, because we'd had the temerity to challenge those who were based down in London. It is the place in the area where the Luddites were hung in a show hanging. You know, it is the place where Chartists would assemble, and all kinds of protests and all kinds of public meetings would happen. And it's also the place of my first political activity in York, where as a student in my first term, we got wind that the fascists were gathering at Clifford's Tower to commemorate it for all of the wrong reasons. and we gathered a large group of us and we went down there and made sure that that did not happen, as indeed we find ourselves in the same, sadly, the same situation today. So it is, you know, a hugely important place for York, and I think what we are doing is appropriate. And it's celebratory as well as reflective. It gives space for the residents of York. I think it's really important that, you know, we are very clearly doing something for the residents of York, but it's also far more flexible a space than some are making it out to be in terms of the kind of events that you can have into the future. So it looks great. Well done for getting it to this stage. You know, it's fundable, it's deliverable, and we can actually do it instead of just talking about it. So yeah, thank you to everybody concerned.
Thank you, Councillor Kilbane. Right, so on that, then we move to the recommendations, which are on page 42 and 43 at paragraph 25, and there are a lot of them, and they are very long. Thank you, Ben, for that. So I will go through them because they are all really important. Paragraph 25 says the executive is asked to note the evolution from the original master plan scheme to the proposed scheme as summarised in Appendix 1 and the progress to date around planning submission and scheme development. B, approve the total project funding package of up to £9.934 million to deliver the Castle and Eye of York and Coppergate car park works comprised of both council and external funding as set out from paragraph 56 of the report. C, approve the inclusion of the scheme in the York Prospectus, which is executive agenda item 15, to seek additional external funding. In the event that the bid is not successful, approve the virement of 1.5 million from the Highways programme to the Castle Gateway scheme across the years 2026, 27 to 28, 29. D, approve the improvements to be made to Coppergate car park to ensure that it's an attractive, safe and convenient alternative parking option for all users, including potential to extend hours of operation at an estimated cost of 200,000. And that's already included in the 9.934 million funding package already mentioned. E, approve the procurement of contractors and specialist support services to enable timely completion of the scheme, pending planning reference 22000209 FULM, with further details submitted on the 4th of July 2025. The works are subject to granting of planning permission. F, delegate authority to the Director of City Development in consultation with Director of Governance, Head of Procurement and Director of Finance to procure such contractors and/or consultants and to take such steps as are necessary to award and enter into any resulting contracts for works and/or services for the completion of the scheme and the proposed works at Coppergate car park. Any and all planning agreements and/or highways land agreements as required, and any grant terms and conditions relating to any external funding bids as may be necessary, as well as any subsequent modification and/or extension to any such contracts post-award. However, for the sake of clarity, this delegation is not for any requirements of either the local planning and/or highways authority. The delegations given in this recommendation must be exercised in the budgets approved within this report. And then finally, G, agree the permanent closure of Castle car park to non-blue badge parking from 2026 and accept the associated loss of income and unavoidable growth pressure in future revenue budget processes. Approve the associated package of mitigation to include works to Coppergate car park and exploring future works to St George's Field surface car park to be considered as part of the wider movement and place work stream, both subject to the granting of any necessary planning permission. To note that during the construction period, the car park will very likely be closed to all users, including blue badge holders, though the extent and impact of such closures on blue badge holders will be sought to be mitigated. Right, everybody, can I see those in favour of those recommendations, please? So those are approved unanimously. Thank you for that. And thank you, Ben and Gary, for that. Right, next then, yeah, okay, thank you. So we need change over now, and we're going to take all of the finance papers together. So that is item number 9, capital programme, 10, Q2, 2025-26 finance and performance monitor, 11, medium-term financial strategy update, and 12, Treasury Management, 25-26 mid-year report and review of prudential indicators. So please go ahead, Debbie. Everybody's left. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So the Capital Monitor 2, I'll just briefly mention each one of those in turn. The Capital Monitor 2 is the second monitor of the year. It sets out the progress in delivering the capital programme, outlines the latest forecast on capital schemes. It does identify significant slippage of around 18 million on a range of schemes. That's mainly due to a review of transport commitments. And there is a lot of detail around individual schemes, but there are no particular issues to draw to your attention. The Revenue Monitor 2 again sets out the latest finance and performance information. We have unfortunately seen a worsening of the forecast overspend, which is now just over 6 million, and the main area for that overspend is adult social care. The service is on with a prioritised action plan that will seek to mitigate those pressures, and elsewhere across the council we'll be looking at cost control measures again and other mitigations that can support adults in managing those pressures. Again, there's a lot of analysis in the report around finance performance across all areas of council. You're also being asked to consider extending the letter of credit for the Museums Trust to support their continued financial resilience. And at paragraph 23, there are a number of grant acceptance recommendations from the Combined Authority funding. And then finally on this one, there is, again, Annex 2, the second annual Council Plan Progress Report, which after this will be published on the council's website alongside those 6 monthly snapshots of progress. For the medium-term financial strategy, this report gives you an update on the forecast position over the next 3 years, and in particular 2026-27. The report just sets out some of the key assumptions, although again, I would remind Executive that these are assumptions for budget planning. Clearly, it'll be for full council to agree the budget and those kind of decisions then, but we obviously need to make some assumptions for financial planning. These assumptions do remain under review. We'll update as and when appropriate. As you'll be aware, the Chancellor sets out the national budget later this month, but we won't know any allocations for individual funding until mid-December, likely 18th, 19th of December, around about then. So that within that medium-term financial strategy report, it sets out the cumulative budget gap of 33.7 million. It also outlines the main strategy for closing this forecast gap, which will be predominantly from the council-wide transformation programme, along with maximising external income, a continued focus on efficiency, reviewing contracts and those kind of things that we're already doing. But it is unlikely that the council could save 33.7 million without considering some other cuts or reductions in service. So that will also be another factor. And we've put together a programme of work that will go through a series of service reviews. So every service will be looked at to help identify where savings can be made. And then finally, the Treasury Management mid-year review. It's a statutory report requirement to report to members on these activities, but this report will be considered by Audit and Governance Committee at its meeting next week. So they will scrutinise the report, but we continue to closely monitor the position, inflation and borrowing and interest rates, but we haven't undertaken any new borrowing actually since the last update, so there's nothing else to draw to your attention.
Thank you, Debbie. Can I see who'd like to speak on this, please? Okay, thank you. Councillor Kilbane, you want to ask a question, please go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry, Debbie. Sorry for asking the question. I just in terms of the letter of credit to the York Museums Trust, would they recently got a £1 million grant, didn't they, from the government as part of the Museums Renewal Fund? Would that give us more certainty that it's less likely that letter of credit will be drawn upon?
Yeah, the better that the organisation does financially, the less likely they are to need to draw that from that letter of credit. The predominant purpose is to give their auditors the the assurance that they remain a going concern. So we don't expect them to call on the letter.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre, would like to speak? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think on reflection, it seems that the capital programme continues to suffer from the failure of this administration to understand its value and its importance when it hollowed out officer capacity from 2023 to 2025. It's unsurprising that key schemes such as the Station Gateway, the Outer Ring Road and Haxby Station have either stalled, ground to a halt or spiralled out of control during that 2-year period. This knock-on effect has led to huge cost increases and the delays we see reported quarter after quarter. Local dither and delay has threatened delivery of a number of these schemes, and we also welcome acknowledgement of paragraph 56 that the government's political game of withdrawing and then restating funding has led to significant cost increase for taxpayers. On specific capital schemes, we do have some concerns. The stated spring 2026 delivery of the city centre sustainability corridor is timed at the same time as the works on Lendal Bridge. That seems quite a high-risk strategy, and more so if work is to start on Castle Gateway. The active travel programme seems to have stopped altogether. Again, it seems to a failure to adequately staff key departments, a trend that's also seen across major housing repairs. On revenue, we continue to see the picture, both nationally and locally, that Labour simply cannot be trusted with finances. Despite record levels of growth, for the first time in a decade outside of COVID, the council's financial position has worsened from Monitor 1 to Monitor 2. Perhaps this is unsurprising when the executive member for finance overspent one of their budgets by an unbelievable 462%. Hardly the message of financial prudence to impress on other directorates. We welcome the paper continues to highlight a third of the council's total overspend, £2 million, is money paid to the government for unbudgeted tax hikes. Planning performance is a perfect illustration of this administration's financial naivety. We told you at budget outset that including significant savings to staff in this area while predicting increases in income was oxymoronic. As expected, this budget is now out by nearly £700,000, and that's just the financial cost. There's no calculation of the drag on growth and housing delivery as a result of this nonsensical approach. On specific lines, I have genuine concerns on page 137 that most of the mitigation in adult social care is a predicted increased income of circa £1 million from the health sector. Faced with draconian government cuts running into the billions, it seems unlikely ICBs will be a low-risk source of additional income. Can't help but notice you've attempted to hide the increase in green bin taxes by resubmitting a second report. If as stated, the charge is £52, that's 12% stealth tax rise since it was first introduced, though I fear its withdrawal suggests this may be even higher. Performance continues to show transport policies aren't working, bus usage is down consistently, and cycle data is now so bad we're not even pretending the indicator exists. Prudential indicators, we don't normally talk about this, but I appreciate there are worrying trends there. Consider Table 2. Our debt after investment balance has grown by a staggering £100 million since this administration took over. That's the result of significant increase in total borrowing, but also the almost total exhaustion of investment balances, which stood at 41.8 million when you came to administration and now sit at only 6 million. On the medium-term financial strategy, make no mistake, this paper is a reflection of austerity writ large. Despite a promise of a Labour government delivering a council tax freeze, this paper reflects a future of inflation-busting council tax rises and savage cuts to services. Facing huge pressures as a result of increasing demand on services, coupled with ever-increased costs, local government was barely surprising. Passing on multi-million-pound costs through national insurance and living wage increases with no uplifting grant pushed councils as close to the precipice as they've ever been. This fair funding review clearly pushes York over the edge. We simply cannot afford to implement £15 million of government cuts and provide anything like the level of services our residents require. An effective 10% cut spread over 3 years is simply unfair and undeliverable. York is the lowest spending authority in the country. How you have allowed your government to make this situation even worse is unforgivable.
Councillor Eyre, it's very interesting to me that you are the only person that I speak to that manages to talk our city down quite on the basis that you do. And for a start, Debbie, would you like to give any factual accuracy to what we've just heard? Thank you.
Right, there was quite a lot in there and I didn't get it all. But in terms of
care about numbers.
In terms of the Treasury, the level of cash isn't reflective of political decision making. That was a deliberate strategy that was agreed in terms of using our cash balances to avoid the cost of borrowing, and we don't borrow in advance of need. So I don't think that's that's something that has happened. That was a deliberate strategy that was agreed a number of years ago and has served the council well in terms of its borrowing costs and only borrowing what we need, given the rates of return are so incredibly low and the cost of borrowing is significantly higher than it was a number of years ago.
Thank you for that, Debbie. Councillor Lomas, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And some of us do care about numbers, and we also care about facts. The green bin charge isn't in this paper for consideration this evening. So that's why we won't be making a decision on it this evening, because we're going to make a decision on it separately. So that's a fact. And Councillor Eyre is quite right. Cycling data has been removed from the performance monitor because officers are assessing what the cycling index is actually measuring and how, and they've removed it while they do that work. And at the same time, they're looking at better ways of monitoring how much people in the city walk, wheel and cycle. So we can give a better picture of sustainable travel, not just look at how many people cycled past a particular junction on a particular day. But turning to what we actually are looking at in the report, or in the reports, we've made no secret of it that adult social care continues to be an area of concern in terms of spending. And that's a shame because we have had some positive progress over a period of time, but the increase in demand for service and the increase in the cost of providing that service driven by inflation is a challenge. It's a challenge to us, it's a challenge to all councils. And I'm grateful, and we should all feel grateful to have an officer team who were working on an action plan to address the issues, because we have to make sure that we can continue to provide the level of care and support that our residents need without continually overspending and without ending up in a position where we are risking other services due to overspends. And I do have confidence that action plan will begin to make a difference. And Councillor Eyre mentions that this has got worse from Monitor 1 to Monitor 2, and that's the case. But change takes time, and making big changes takes time. And I think it's only right and proper that we allow a period of time for change to happen, and for those changes to actually embed before we test whether they are making a difference or not. And it's also no secret that we're facing a financial challenge in the next 3 years, and we have the unknown outcome of the Fair Funding Review, and I stress the unknown outcome of the Fair Funding Review, because we've developed our medium-term financial strategy on the basis of the modelling that we've done on the information that the government put out for consultation for the Fair Funding Review. And they have not yet put out their response to the consultation for the Fair Funding Review. And they're nowhere close to giving councils individual settlements. So we've done some modelling on the basis of what was put out for consultation by government. And we are working really hard to make sure that we can meet our duty to set a balanced budget and going through that process on the basis of that modelling. While we wait for the response to the consultation, while we wait for our final settlement, and it's our job to be agile to respond to whatever comes from the response to the consultation, and what our final settlement would be, as Debbie says, when we receive that in December. Of course, since the Fair Funding consultation was launched, we have been working to lobby government, and we've been doing that in partnership with both of our city's MPs and our mayor, and individually, to make sure that we can get the best for York residents and make sure that the funding formula that is finally used for those final settlements recognises the unique position we are in and the specific needs that we have in our city. And I'm really disappointed that we couldn't do so on a cross-party basis with other members of this council. But beyond being willing to sign a letter, they've only wanted to gripe from the sidelines about what's happening. And what we know is that griping rarely gets you anywhere. It's positive action that gets you somewhere on this. So a lot is unknown, a lot is uncertain, but we continue with our process of assessing our medium-term financial strategy, reviewing that when new information comes in, making sure it's always as up-to-date as possible, and formulating our budget on that basis. Councillor also mentions the capital programme. I think he made some quite grand claims about the capital programme and why it has suffered. The capital programme has suffered because of decisions made by previous administrations to announce schemes with no realistic ability to deliver them, and to allow those schemes to pile up without actually ever taking any action. And we've been really clear that we'll only deliver schemes when we're confident that we can do so. And so we have had to start from quite early stages in many cases to go back to the drawing board, to make sure schemes are appropriate, to make sure they're deliverable, to assess and prioritise and not borrow money where we don't need to borrow money, and not incur borrowing costs where we don't need to incur borrowing costs, and to hold off on borrowing until we are given the proper, careful advice of our statutory officers that is the right time to borrow money. It's obviously important that we make the decision to accept all of the funding, the very long list of funding from the Mayoral Combined Authority, and also that we continue to seek funding through the Mayoral Combined Authority and to demonstrate to the Combined Authority that we can deliver when we receive funding from them. And I think we actually should be celebrating that a little bit, because it's quite significant amount of money we're bringing in to the authority. And going back to what I said earlier, to still make sure we can make progress and we can deliver things even in difficult financial circumstances, and to make sure that our grand plans for our city are not curtailed by the difficulties in local government funding. So I hope that everyone will have a little celebration when we accept all of this funding, and that we will continue, and we'll talk about it later, to seek funding from external sources so that we can continue our grand plans for the city.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Councillor Pavlovic, sorry, I was just thinking, does that say Revilius? No, I was just dumbfounded. I thought you had the wrong name. I thought you had the wrong name tag in front of you. Please go ahead, Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you. I just feel I just need to challenge the comment about planning performance being the result of the overspend of 700,000. The planning department is fully staffed. Enforcement is fully staffed. Their performance is higher than it's ever been. The reason that we have an overspend is that we didn't have many building control staff, and the one that we did have retired. It's an area that's incredibly difficult to recruit to. So we've had to have a market supplement, which is why an essential part of the service is building control. And so the other expenditure is that we've just not had The applications come through, but now we've got a local plan. Now that we've streamlined the planning process, those applications are coming through. So you'll see a very different position by the year end, I strongly suspect.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic. Right, on that note, then we will move to the recommendations for each paper. So on item number 9, capital programme, the recommendations there on page 92 at paragraph 7. And that is the executive is asked to recommend to full council the adjustments resulting in a decrease in 25-26 budget of 17.865 million as detailed in the report. To note the 25-26 revised budget of 162.466 million as set out in paragraph 10 and table 1. Approve the virement of £1.3 million between the integrated transport budget and Lendal Bridge budget to fund the additional works set out in the report. And note the restated capital programme for 25-26 to 29-30 is set out in Annex 1. Please can I see those who approve those recommendations? Those are approved unanimously. Thank you for that. Item number 10. The quarter 2 25-26 finance and performance monitor. So those recommendations are on page 124 at paragraphs 20, 21.
That is the supplement report, page 80.
Okay, thank you. Apologies, sorry. So the supplement report for agenda item 10 is at page 77 in the report pack, and the recommendations are on page 80 and 81 at paragraph 19, 20, 21 and 22, which is exceptionally long as well. So going back to paragraph 19, executive is asked to note the finance and performance information, note and support the need to undertake mitigation action identified within the report. Paragraph 20, executive is asked to approve the extension to 31st of December 2027 for the letter of credit to York Museums Trust as outlined in paragraphs 34 to 36. Paragraph 21, executive is asked to approve the second annual council plan progress report for publication on the council's web pages. And paragraph 22, which is the very long one, in relation to acceptance of the funding from York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority are recommended to 1, accept funding from York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, delegating authority to Director for City Development to progress the below in consultation with Executive Member for Economy and Culture or the Executive Member for Climate Change and Environment. £2.39 million from the Mayoral Investment Fund, £604,893 from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, £3.066209 from the Net Zero Fund, and the below is delegated to Chief Strategy Officer as below, but due to the fact that it is below £250,000, that's D. £216,000 from the Mayor Renewables Fund. 2, accept funding from the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, delegating authority to the Director of Housing and Communities in consultation, the Executive Member for Economy and Culture and Executive Member for Children, Young People and Education for £120,000 from the Mayoral Investment Fund. 3, accept funding from the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, delegating authority to the Director of Environment and Regulatory Services in consultation with Executive Member for Transport for £4.423 million for local highways maintenance funding. 4, accept funding from the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, delegating authority to the Director of City Development in consultation with the Executive Member for Transport for £7.456 million from the local transport grant, £1.582 million from the integrated transport block, £190,000 from the local transport resource fund, and £4.836416 million from the Department for Transport bus grant. So I think everybody will agree that that is an awful lot of money coming through to the local authority from other organisations, namely the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, that will support us in delivering all the marvellous schemes that we have started and are busy delivering. So can I see those who are in favour of those recommendations, please? So that is approved unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for that. Going back to the main agenda, item number 11 is the medium-term financial strategy update, and those recommendations are on page 202 at paragraph 9, where executive is asked to agree the medium-term financial strategy as outlined in this report. Can I see those in favour of those recommendation? That recommendation, thank you, is approved unanimously. And then item number 12, Treasury Management 2025-26 mid-year report and review of prudential indicators, which starts at page 215 in the agenda. And we have recommendations on page 216 at paragraph 6, where executive is asked to note the 25-26 Treasury Management activity for the period ending 30th September 2025, and the prudential indicators outlined in Annex A, and note the compliance with all indicators. So can I see those in favour of those recommendations? Thank you. So those are agreed unanimously as well. And thank you, everybody, and thanks for all the hard work that has been done around finance. And that is both for the revenue budget on a daily basis and the capital programme. And thank you to all the staff in the council who are working hard to make sure that we stick to our budgets and also to deliver for the residents of York. You're all doing a marvellous job, and I am happy to talk the city up rather than talk it down, which I think is a very good approach personally. Item 13 on the agenda, therefore, is community infrastructure levy. And we have Gary Taylor and Alison Cook here with us to talk to us about that. And that starts on page 235 of the agenda. So please take a seat. Alison, are you going to start this one? Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report deals with the outcomes of the Community Infrastructure Levy examination and recommends how to implement the levy moving forward. As a background, Executive took a decision in June 2022 to progress with the preparation of a Community Infrastructure Levy, and we proceeded to public consultations in spring 2023, winter 2023, and most recently in summer this year, taking consideration of updated viability evidence. The draft charging schedule, as set out at Annex A, was submitted for independent examination in July 2025, and the hearing session took place on the 2nd of September. In total, there were 12 participants, predominantly from the developer community, at the examination to discuss progressing the approach to SIL. As part of the hearing, the examiner did request further information from the council, and interested parties were given an opportunity to comment on this post the examination session. We received the final report from the examiners on the 22nd of October, and it's attached for you Annex B to this report. The conclusions of the examiner were that the draft City of York Council Community Infrastructure Levy charging schedule, subject to the making of the modifications suggested, satisfies the drafting requirements, and therefore he recommended that the draft charging schedule could be approved. As part of this, he did suggest modifications to the draft charging schedule as submitted. These are to zero rate, so nil rate all strategic sites in the charging schedule, and reducing the residential rate from £150 per square metre to £75 per square metre. The rate of £150 per square metre for purpose-built student accommodation was accepted and remains as per the draft charging schedule. The modifications themselves reflect the examiner's consideration of the viability evidence, including consideration of general uplift in build costs and evidence presented to the examination. And the modifications were seen as necessary to ensure that the community infrastructure levy was proportionate and viable, as he set out in his conclusions. These conclusions from the examination are binding in relation to ensuring it's robust and can proceed to be adopted. The recommendations to proceed are set out in paragraph 36 of the report and would enable to proceed to adoption by council. I'd just like to draw your attention to recommendation 3, which recommends the implementation of SIL from the 1st of February 2026. We think that this would allow the requisite amount of time for processes and council systems to be implemented, as well as the requisite notice for the developer community to put online. I just also like to say that this report doesn't recognise how we're going to spend SIL monies, but we have put at recommendation 6 that we'll be bringing a further report to you to discuss this, to make a decision on that in due course.
Thank you, Alison. Gary, do you want to say anything?
Just in the context of the recommendation relevant to me in around the editorial changes and particularly the instalment policy. The instalment policy wasn't a part of the inquiry. That's something that sits with us as officers delegated from yourself. So there were some concerns raised that the instalment policies are quite long in terms of the payment mech. So we will work internally to bunch that up a bit better and engage accordingly and bring that back to yourselves, but with a delegation here back to myself in terms of finalising that policy.
Thank you for that. Councillor Pavlovic, would you want to go ahead? Thank you.
Okay. One person forgets my name, the other one forgets to put the mic on. Just a question, Gary. In respect of the money that we receive, can we forward fund projects such as a bridge or Castle Gateway, for example, from anticipated funds coming in?
Probably a question for Debbie. It depends in terms of, so other authorities, if there's a known fund coming forward, and do forward fund schemes if that funding is known within the SIL agreement. So we get a payment mech, as we've already outlined.
Yeah.
So there will be an agreement in place. It will be a matter of 151 in terms of whether we're willing to take that position. In terms of whether the funding can be spent on things like Castle Gateway, regen and stuff, so SIL funding comes unring fenced, so it's not like 106. It does have to be spent on development related and infrastructure related activity. But that, as I said, we will be bringing a separate report in terms of how that SIL funding is allocated, or a recommendation to yourself, how you want to allocate that funding and how that proportionality is in terms of the proportionality to more complex major schemes as opposed to community-based activity, etc.
And Chair, do you want me to start or do you want Councillor Eyre to start?
You go ahead, Councillor Pavlovic.
Okay. Thank you for the report and for the work that you've spent on this. And just on a personal perspective, it's great to be able to work with officers that not only have knowledge and experience, but are so committed and dedicated to bringing these schemes forward for the benefit of the city. And although this has been long in the planning, as you've heard, from 2022, the actual process itself of submitting the evidence and then getting a hearing and having that hearing considered and the report prepared was incredibly quick. Submission in July, hearing in September, report in October, going to full council in November. November, yes. Although for the reasons outlined by Alison, we didn't get everything that we expected, but that's the whole point of a public hearing and independent inspections. But don't underestimate just how much of a difference a potential £18 million additional coming into the city from developers that would not have been paying that had we not had SIL. It is really, really significant. And the table that you had on that you have on page 247 around the implementation dates did seem excessively long, and I'm grateful to the work of officers looking at other areas and seeing how they can bring that that money coming in earlier in the process as opposed to much later in the process. So it's a really positive thing. It's incredibly viable, and it's a cost that developers will incorporate into their build costs and their land purchase prices as well. So it's not as though it's going to delay or retard development moving forward. So yeah, I recommend approval of SIL and bringing it to full council. The reason that it's going off to February for an implementation date is because if we approve it on Thursday, all those schemes that have been approved and are just waiting legal sign-off on their Section 106 would technically become eligible for SIL. So this is the opportunity for those legal processes to get signed off. But post any submissions, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, any submissions that come in that are new post the second or the full council hearing will be eligible for SIL. Is that correct, or will it only come in on the 1st of February? You have told me this, but I have forgotten.
It's following so anything decided after the 1st of February, from the 1st of February, anything decided from them will be subject to SIL, and that may be applications that are submitted prior to that, depending on when they're actually decided.
Right, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's great to see this coming through, and remarkably quickly after successful passing of local plan in February as well. So it's been a great year in that respect, isn't it, for the city. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, I should extend my thanks to Alison and her team for all the work that's gone onto it. And as you said, in such a short time, I think as Councillor Pavlovic, myself and Alison know that one thing planning likes is lengthy hearings, expensive barristers. And I think if I had my time again, perhaps, and know what I know now, I may have considered going into being a planning barrister as a future career. Clearly, this is a good thing for the city. We welcome this, but I think one thing that we do have to look at is that the issues raised within the paper, the infrastructure gap that we had for the local plan was already pretty significant. The SIL was never going to be the answer to all of those things, but obviously any loss in that does bring more stark realization into what the size of that massive gap particularly is. And I think both locally and nationally, we do all need to get a better grip that houses do not appear in a vacuum. I think bold housing targets are absolutely one thing and a good thing of what we need for the city, but the current system doesn't seem to provide the mechanism for the delivery of that key infrastructure. And it's not just about delivering houses, it's about delivering homes and delivering communities where people can strive. And I think we need to get a grip nationally of policy that delivers both new homes and has a mechanism for the infrastructure, rather than passing a local plan that is £500 million short of the infrastructure that's required to deliver it.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Right, so on that basis then, let's go to page 242. Recommendations are there, paragraph 36, and I've got tons to read again. Paragraph 36, Executive is asked to 1, consider and accept the outcomes of the independent examiner's report at Annex B, including modifications proposed by the examiner to ensure the community infrastructure levy and proposed charging schedule can be soundly implemented. 2, subject to 1, recommend to council that the draft SIL charging schedule be approved as set out in Annex A, as modified by the examiner, as set out in Annex B to this report. 3, subject to a positive decision for 1 and 2, to recommend that the implementation date for the community infrastructure levy will take effect from the 1st of February 2026. 4, subject to a positive decision for 1 and 2, delegate authority to the Director of City Development to review the instalment policy and make any necessary further minor editorial changes to the charging schedule or a change to the implementation date if necessary. And 5, subject to positive decision for 1 and 2, delegate authority to the Director for Environment and Regulatory Services to agree publishing and necessary documentation for the introduction of SIL. Right, okay, so, 6, sorry, missed that one. To note, a further report regarding the spending of SIL will be brought to a future executive for consideration. Can I see those in favour of all 6 of those recommendations? Thank you. So that's approved unanimously as well. Thank you, Gary and Alison. Given that we've been going for 2 hours now, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. So if you can come back at 25 to 7, we will continue with agenda item number 14 at that point. Thanks, everybody. Right, thank you everybody for bearing with us and reconvening, ready to pick up again on this meeting of executive. So we're on now agenda item 14, which is the North Yorkshire and York Local Nature Recovery Strategy LNRS publication draft. And here we have with us Gary Taylor, Alison Cook and Guy Hanson to speak to us about this. So who's starting? Alison starting. Off you go, Alison. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Local Nature Recovery Strategy is a spatial strategy that seeks to map nature recovery actions and deliver the government's England-wide nature targets. They are new. This is a new system and a statutory requirement set out in the Environment Act 2021. The LNRS is intended to drive more coordinated, practical and focused action to help restore, join and halt nature decline. And the strategy it agrees the priorities for nature recovery, maps the most valuable existing areas for nature and maps specific proposals for creating and improving habitat for nature and the wider environment goals. I'm going to hand over to Guy Hanson, who's going to take us through how this LNRS is developed.
Thank you, Chair. North Yorkshire Council was appointed by the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA, as what was referred to as a responsible authority for York and North Yorkshire, and the City of York Council are referred to as a support authority, along with other supporting authorities such as the national parks, so the Dales and Yorkshire Moors. Also, the combined authority is a support authority. And council officers have worked closely with North Yorkshire Council since early in 2022 to develop and agree on the LNRS. In terms of more recent activities, North Yorkshire Council undertook a 6-week public consultation on the draft LNRS throughout North Yorkshire and York in the summer of 2025. CYC promoted the consultation and provided formal feedback comments as part of this. Since then, the outcomes of the consultation have been considered and the intended strategy revisions agreed with the support of City of York Council officers. We don't yet have a copy of the final LNRS documents, which is a suite of documents and an interactive online map. We anticipate receiving these on the 7th of November 2025. If we receive them on the 7th of November, after this, we have a 28-day period if we wish to issue a position of objection to North Yorkshire Council. We anticipate that North Yorkshire Council will seek approval eventually from their executive in January 2026 to publish the LNRS. So in the meantime, in your papers, you've got copies of the most important parts of the June 2025 public consultation draft. And in terms of what we're asking as a decision now, to note that the decision cycles of North Yorkshire Council and the City of York Council aren't synchronised. And the reports are also published significantly in advance of meetings. And so it's not possible to agree a City of York Council position on the LNRS at executive that falls within these statutory periods of the LNRS procedure regulations. So that's the 28 days. So in summary, we would have to receive something, think about it for a couple of times to make sure it is as what we think it is, write a report, and then get back to them, and we would have to have just absolutely perfect timing to achieve that. And so therefore, instead, the recommended decision here is to delegate to the Director of City Development the action of informing City of York Council of the action of informing North Yorkshire Council of a City of York Council position on the final LNRS within the statutory period. And then, so after that decision, the anticipated next steps, very briefly, officers are to review the final LNRS when we receive it and check it is as anticipated. Just to reiterate, we've been working with them for 2 years and know pretty much what we're going to get. After that, the executive decision to delegate is to be executed and recorded as an officer decision. And then post that, we're into a sort of delivery phase. And so North Yorkshire Council have funding from DEFRA for an initial period of the LNRS delivery phase, and we will work closely with North Yorkshire Council to coordinate those initial actions, and further to which City of York Council officers will also consider and develop our local nature recovery strategy delivery mechanisms and look for funding opportunities. Thank you, and we're happy to take questions.
Thank you, Guy. Anybody want to say anything more down there? No, okay, great. Who would like to speak on this item? Councillor Kent, please go ahead.
Briefly, because of the time of night, not because it doesn't warrant more attention, but I just wanted to thank officers and Guy in particular for the detailed attention he's given this over the last 2 years. I think it's been, from my perspective, it's been very well coordinated between North Yorkshire and York in terms of updating me, but I hope Guy feels the same. But I also want to thank him for the extensive work he did as part of the consultation, which included sitting in local libraries and working there in order to be open to as many York people as possible. And I really welcome the overall trajectory of this. Obviously, the opportunities across the region are huge in terms of nature recovery. They're vital and they're exciting, if so long as we get sufficient funding for total delivery. But there are also I don't want to underestimate the opportunities within York. We have amazing work done by the Green Corridors sort of project with St Nick's, and the City of York Council also has such wealth of expertise in ecology and biodiversity, and that's shone through in all the responses to this strategy. So I'm very confident that delegating this decision is the right thing to do. But thanks very much for all the hard work.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. And therefore, on that, we will move to the recommendations that are on page 291 and 292 at paragraph 22. And so they are outlined as recommendation 1 and 2 under that, and it does include the delegation of authority to the Director of City Development to respond to the statutory 28-day period following the issue of the publication draft LNRS, as Guy outlined, in order to meet the submission deadlines. So can I see those who are in favour of those recommendations, please? So those are approved unanimously. Marvellous, thank you very much. And there you go, you can go forward and respond now and not have to worry about coming back to us. So thank you for that. Thanks for joining us this evening. Next item on the agenda is item number 15, York's Prospectus, Going for Good Growth with Innovation, Culture and Heritage at our heart. And we have Claire Fole and Sam Blythe here to join Gary Taylor. Gary's very busy this evening. So who's going to start on this one? Claire, are you starting? Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The report today invites the Executive to approve York's Prospectus, Going for Growth with Innovation, Culture and Heritage at its heart, Annex A. The prospectus in Annex A has been developed over the last 18 months or so, starting with the mayoral pipeline of projects approved by the leader last summer and summarised in a presentation to the Mayor to help inform the then emerging local growth plan. Now, since the approval of the Regional Local Growth Plan by the Combined Authority earlier this year, the Council has worked closely with partners to set out an ambitious and bold approach aiming to attract investment in projects that are designed to provide more well-paid jobs, more affordable housing, better health and wellbeing outcomes for residents with more accessible and sustainable design from the outset. In addition, by taking a citywide approach, our collective purchasing power, once we have secured the investment, will unlock significant social outcomes. By drawing on the approved social outcome framework, we will literally benefit twice, once by the investment itself and then how it further benefits local communities. All of these projects you see in Annex A require external investment from multiple sources, whether public or private, and this prospectus is the starting point, solidifying our priorities as we work with funders to continue to improve this great city. Finally, the prospectus is designed with skills, jobs and residents from our most deprived communities in mind. It responds to the anti-poverty strategy to turn the tide and create lasting change, which is your next item for discussion, Executive. Thank you. I'll just hand over to Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Executive. So as Claire detailed, this is about detailing opportunities that have the potential for significant local and regional benefit to improve the opportunities for York's businesses and residents. It's a continuation of the mayoral pipeline approved by a leader last July and reflects the ambitions of the York narrative, the York 2032 ambitions and the council plan. The council and partner proposals for these are council and partner proposals to form a response to the Combined Authority's local growth plan, and thank you to the Combined Authority and others for their feedback in terms of the development of the prospectus. It was also taken to Corporate Scrutiny Committee in September, and that has also helped to inform how the prospectus has developed since then. And I thank members of that committee for their feedback in terms of its development. Just to note, there is an ongoing piece of research on the economic and social value of the projects identified in the prospectus. As the paper identifies, once that's complete, we will bring a further report back to the leader at an executive decision session in due course. Just finally, this is a live document in the sense that as projects are completed, they will move out of the prospectus, new projects will be included. So it's a piece of work that's ongoing. It's not a once and done approach to this piece of work. But what it does do is provide an articulation of the ambition of York, and informs discussions with the combined authority, with the government, and with private sector investors as well. At that point, I'll take any questions.
Thank you for that, Sam, and I'd like to thank you both for all the work that you have done, both internally with our colleagues in the council, but also right across the city. It's been a huge amount of work and collaborative partnership approach to how we actually develop our city for the future, and also how we put together a prospectus that shows the external world quite what ambition we have for our place and also for the people within York. And this is the first time that I think we have had something that is as comprehensive, that we can go out to the combined authority, as you say, Whitehall, and we're getting a lot of interest already, which is absolutely fantastic, and also to the private sector to really take York onto the next stage of its development and allow our residents to live in affordable, warm houses in fantastic communities, get the training and job opportunities that they need, and also to bring the jobs of the future onto York Central through the Innovation Hub, and basically replumb our city around movement and place and the way that we move around, which is absolutely fantastic. So thank you for that. So would anybody else like to speak on this subject? No? Okay, great. So it looks like we're all in agreement then that this is marvellous, and it's an opportunity to talk our city up rather than talk it down, which we seemed to be doing earlier in some parts. But anyway, so the recommendations for the York's prospectus are on page 466 at paragraph 18, and executive is recommended to approve York's prospectus, and that's so that we can go out there and sell the city and bring that external funding in. So please can I see those who are in approval of this? Thank you. So that's approved unanimously as well. Well done, everybody. And let's get on and do that marvellous work that we've got planned. Thanks very much. Right, Gary can go home now, can he? Thank you. So item number 16 is tackling poverty today and turning the tide to create lasting change. That's a strategy and strategic action plan for addressing poverty in York 2025 to 2035. So it's a 10-year strategy that we have in front of us here, and Pauline Stutchfield and Sam Blythe are with us here to introduce the paper to us. So please go ahead, Pauline. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Another partnership and collaborative piece of work for the city. So the report presents a 10-year anti-poverty strategy on behalf of the city. The strategy has been informed by significant consultation and co-design with members, partner organisations and communities and residents of York. Can I thank officers, particularly Sam, and all members, including scrutiny members, partners and residents involved in developing the strategy, and particularly the action plan, the form of which has been very much guided by their feedback. Just to highlight the key elements of the strategy, including adoption that all city partners use the shared definition of poverty, i.e. the Joseph Rowntree Foundation definition, and that's really important that we have that singular view of poverty. Note the key performance indicators that will be used to monitor progress in the future. the 3 horizons that we've adopted in this strategy, so that we're not just looking at tackling poverty today, but also preventing people from falling into poverty in the future and creating long-lasting change. And that's really important, that we're not just reacting, that we are planning for that change and addressing underlying causes of poverty. Just to add, in terms of the monitoring of this strategy, that will be through the Partnership Financial Inclusion Steering Group, which includes 2 executive members here. They will monitor the action plan, also make recommendations on future annual action plans, and also achievement of the performance indicators, and will report back to executive members once a year. So executive being asked to endorse this strategy for onward approval by full council this week, and I know Sam would like to add a few words, an update on particularly the indicators for multiple deprivation. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline. As per Pauline's comments, it's 10-year strategy. It responds to our 2032 ambitions agreed by council and partners, and there's also a direct response of activity identified in the council plan. It's been developed and coordinated with partners, and I thank them for their involvement throughout the development of the process, also considered by Corporate Scrutiny Committee, and it's a really helpful engagement session with them. So again, I thank members of that committee for their activity and action in regard to the strategy. In terms of the consultation process itself, it was an extensive consultation period that progressed through August, September and part of October. The draft strategy and consultation were available online via our council website, also in hard copy format across the city's library services, York Food Bank, Community Furniture Store, Citizens Advice and our West Office's Customer Service Centre. An easy read version of the strategy was also available throughout that process. We hosted engagement sessions with a range of engagement groups, as referenced in the report, and also discussed the strategy with a representative from the Poverty Truth Commission. I thank everyone who took part in that process. As Pauline mentioned, the purpose of the remit of the strategy covers 3 horizons, which is the idea to tackle poverty today, alleviate the potential for people to fall into poverty, and also turn the tide to create long-lasting change, which was part of the discussion at the previous item of this meeting. For each of the actions that are identified in the action plan that accompanies the strategy, it looked to tackle the causes of poverty which have been identified by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Just to pick up on the point around the indices of multiple deprivation, as per chance, the new IMD figures were released last week, just before the conversation we're having today. In terms of where we are as a city, broadly on the same level as we were previously, but what I would say is that deprivation is still deprivation, poverty is still poverty, and there's still inequality in the city which we need to tackle. And hopefully this strategy goes some way to achieving that. As Pauline mentioned, moving forward, the Financial Inclusion Steering Group partnership will monitor progress against activity in the strategy and look at the progress made at tackling poverty in the city. And on that note, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sam. Who would like to speak on this item then? Councillor, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, briefly, due to the time, and I think we had a history lesson go back a lot longer than I'm going to go back earlier on, but I think I just want to make that point that it's important to recognise the work of the Rowntree family in the year that's marked 100 years since Joseph Rowntree passed away, with his work on pensions and welfare that was first taken up by the government in 1906. Obviously, the report itself notes it's 125 years since the report by Seaborn Rowntree, which was a benchmark going back to all these years. Really welcome the report. Covers a lot of the actions that need to be taken across the city by both council and partners. It perhaps could go into a little more detail about what the actual outcomes, the number of people that are going to be helped is, but that can come as we go along. There is reference to the government on childhood poverty. Page 10 states that at national level, the UK government has made tackling child poverty a priority, but many organisations continue to tell us that continuing the 2-child cap on benefits keeps many children in poverty, and there isn't any mention in this of work that we need to do to get change on that nationally. And my final comment, you've kind of headed off a bit, so I was going to say it's helpful. The report points out that poverty affects all wards and the citywide approach is really relevant. I was going to ask you if you're going to update the figures with the latest ONS figures from 2025, so that's welcome to hear that one. And obviously that does show that York is lowest out of 296 of the least deprived overall, but that does identify many areas within the city. I think that's one of the issues we always have in York, that when you take things generally, it can often mask the areas of real genuine poverty, and therefore it really does emphasise at those lower levels the depth of poverty that is actually existing in areas in the city, and that we do need to take action quickly to deal with that.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Webb?
Thank you, Chair. I'm really glad that we've got to this point tonight and that we're bringing this forward. It's not really a history lesson, but for anyone who's known me over the sort of 6 years-ish that I've been on the council, I spent a lot of time banging on about supporting our most vulnerable. And I think this is just another way in which this administration is stepping up to that plate. Firstly, let me start by thanking a few people. I think to begin with, Sam, you have done some absolutely brilliant work in pulling this together over time, and importantly, taking the time to work with other people. It's a big job to do this properly and to co-produce this with others, and I think that shines through in this report. It's a really, really positive piece of work. And then, of course, that leads on to all of those residents, those communities, those organisations that you have worked with and that have come together to build this strategy through active consultation. And I think it's really, really positive to see. I think what I would say about poverty in York, and sort of following on slightly from Councillor Eyre's comments about sort of hidden poverty within the city. It's good that he noticed, and I think that we need to go into a bit more detail about that. I think if you live in York, I always think you're sort of hit by poverty in 3 ways. I think firstly, you are hit by poverty. You have less funds, less support necessarily than other people. Secondly, York is an incredibly unequal city. Absolutely, fundamentally, that is one of our biggest problems that we face. And thirdly, it's not a big city. So we've got communities that are living cheek by jowl with other communities where one is very much the have-nots and the other is very much the haves. And so you are seeing every day the inequalities that you face, and that is really challenging. And I know that certainly myself, Councillor Douglas in Heworth Ward, see that all the time. I think following on about those inequalities, this new data that's come out that I'm sure Sam was really pleased about, it came out just before the publication of this. York has got 8 areas that are in the 20% most deprived in the country. We do not have the huge swathes of poverty that some areas have, and we should be really clear about the fact that actually government ambitions to focus money with deprivation is really, really good. It's really positive, but we can't get away from the fact that sometimes our poverty is masked, and that doesn't help us very much. I think if you, in recent weeks, in the last week or so, if you could go on the various media outlets and search by postcodes to work out how deprived your particular patch was. It's really interesting to do that and to actually look and say that one street almost in York and the next street along are hugely different. Councillor Eyre mentioned something about detailed numbers, things like that, to look out for over time. And I agree. I think that one thing that we've talked about is about the monitoring over time, which is why it was mentioned earlier on that myself and Councillor Lomas, who again I should thank for her absolutely fundamental role in bringing all this together, will be monitoring those, and we're working on exactly what it is that we should be monitoring over time to see improvements. And then finally, couple of things. So firstly, on the 3 pillars of this, obviously the issues today, there are clear things that we can be doing and are already doing. A good example is use of lift data that we've been using to target residents who we think actually are eligible for benefits that they're currently not claiming, and that we're dealing with that. We get those letters out to them, and that has raised lots of money for residents in York, and that's a positive thing. Other stuff would be the next step, of course, is the preparing for the future. And that is looking at constantly, how do we, through that steering group, through our financial inclusion steering group, how do we take what we've got today and then plan to do something slightly different next time to support people, to stop them falling into that poverty trap. Finally, because I don't want to go on too much, is that prevention, that really long-term systemic change. Now, let's be really honest, and I will say this, that is incredibly difficult to do within a capitalist society. You know, the nature of a capitalist society leads to poverty. You know, that is what it is about, sadly. And so we have to think, how can we really work in York to affect those levers that really change things significantly? And I think that this shows that we are ambitious to make those changes and work with our partners across the city to do everything that we can to make York a better place for everybody, not just a few people, but for absolutely everybody. And then finally, there are, of course, issues around child poverty, and the 2-child limit is a good example of that. And it's something that's in the news quite a lot at the moment. And I personally very much want to see that 2-child limit removed. And I hope that that is somewhere where the government is going. That's certainly what's being indicated at the moment. And again, that would be a huge, huge positive step forward for the Labour government. So there are lots of positives in here. There is an awful lot of work to do through the action plan. But finally, please support this. Thank you again to Sam and to the team. This is a great piece of work. And let's go forward and get it done. Cheers.
Great, thank you, Councillor Webb, and yeah, thanks to everybody that's been involved in this. It's really very clear the range of organisations and partners that have been involved, and it's very heartening to see that so many people in York care enough about this to have committed to what has been quite a lengthy and detailed process. So thank you to you, Sam, and also to them when you see them around. And I just really would like to leave everybody with pause for thought on that inequity that we see around our city and understanding it more. There are some organisations that have started to look into inequalities across constituencies, and we know that York is a 2-constituency place with York Central and York Outer. And it is really quite marked, the differences between those, and a constituency-wide, local authority-wide, that is why our poverty is masked. It resides generally in York Central, not solely, but generally, and York Outer is one of the most affluent constituencies in the whole country. York Central is not. So I do ask everybody to keep that in mind in everything that we do, and look at how we can improve the lives of everybody living in poverty across the whole of York. And in order to do that, we need to go to the recommendations, which are on page 551, paragraph 14. And we are invited to approve the 10-year strategy and action plan and endorse it for adoption for full council on behalf of the City of York. Can I see those who are in favour of that, please? So that's approved unanimously. Thank you, Sam, Pauline. Thanks for joining us this evening, and please go forth and start implementing. Very good, thank you. I don't think that was one of the recommendations for today. That's next time. So item number 17 is City of York Council Neighbourhood Model implementation phase. We have Pauline staying at the table with us, and Laura Williams has joined us to talk about this. So Pauline, are you going to start?
Yes, I'll just quickly introduce. This is a follow-up report to the December 2024 report on the design principles of a neighbourhood model. This report is about implementation, and it's another report out of 3 that will help us address inequalities in the city. Since approval of the design principles, different partners across the primary care, secondary care and mental health sectors and the ICB have worked with us alongside members of the voluntary and community sector to develop this approach, which includes the development of a shared outcomes framework, alignment of resources at neighbourhood level, and that work is starting rather than, I don't want to give the impression that we're there, we're not, but the work is starting, and the testing of practice through case studies and prototypes, which are outlined in the report. I won't say much more, but I want to thank all partners involved, but I want to say a special thanks to Laura, who's had a key role in producing the 2 reports, and as she attends her last executive before leaving the council to become a director at another council, who are incredibly lucky to have her. It's up to us to deliver the legacy she's left, and the transformation needed to put residents fully at the heart of our work across the city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline. Laura, do you want to say something now?
Well, I
Please
don't
go ahead.
now.
I think you'll have to.
No, I think Pauline's covered most things. I think basically this is how we make York a city where people can get the right help in the right place at the right time, and it being from people that they know and they trust. It's building on previous really successful work like our community hubs and our local area coordination. So it's just a better way of doing really good work that we know is already happening across the city, but doing it together and doing it with real intention. And I think this is basically, this paper is about how we take it from really good intentions in our design principles to really driving delivery forward now. We're very much ahead of the curve, York, in terms of developing integrated neighbourhood teams. We've built really strong partnerships through our York Health and Care Collaborative, and we've rooted the work really firmly in the council's transformation plan. So I think we're in a really good place now to take this, or you're in a really good place now to take this forward. Yeah, and the recommendations set out next steps. So approving the shared outcomes and practice framework and putting in place the governance that will keep us accountable on this work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Who would like to speak on this one? Councillor, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Laura, and best wishes going forward. I know you'll be fantastic. I think in general, obviously we support the principle of this model. I think it is reflective of better working relationships across the public sector in general that's been going on for around about a decade. Residents don't and have never drawn distinction about where they get services from. They just want services from somebody, and the right services. They don't care if that's the NHS, they don't care if that's social care, they don't care if it's mental health. Equally, on top of that, all of us deliver better services and more efficiently when we work together and we talk together and our systems work properly together. Obviously, having devolved decision making into communities is something that Liberal Democrat councillors highly value, and it's good to see this administration maintaining the local area coordinator model and the community hub model, which we'd previously championed. Again, detail is needed on how it will work on the outcomes, but as mentioned on the previous one, those will come in terms of monitoring. At the moment, it can appear and feel a little bit health heavy, and I think I'm reflecting on that, and I've just added to my notes in terms of saying I think that's probably a factor of the fact that health and adult social care have been sort of forced together over the period of time due to financial issues, and I've got a better relationship, and it's now the council that are coming in to join that one. So it's not quite clear at the moment how some of those wider council services will practically fit into that support, and I think just giving a practical example, for example, adult social care and the NHS will deliver huge amounts of work on falls prevention and making sure people are staying healthy and we're maintaining that they're able to stay out and don't have those lengthy stays in hospital. That doesn't necessarily, the work they've done, link with fixing the broken flag in the paving or fixing the pothole that someone trips over that then eventually leads to that lengthy stay, no matter what you've done in terms of fall prevention. So this should and can and will hopefully bring all of those things together about what we can do from an NHS and adult social care perspective, but what we can also do from a council and community perspective to make sure that we're doing all we can to make people stay safe. I think at the moment it is, and we discussed this many times, and Councillor Lomas is doing videos at the moment to try and explain to people as part in terms of the budget. It's often intangible to residents what the council does and what the support does in terms of that, unless you access support services. So I think for those people who do currently access services, something like this will look and feel real to them. To those that currently don't, and hopefully will not in the future for a long time get to use it, it's harder for them to understand the value of this. And I look forward to working with the exec member on how we as a council corporate body and 47 councillors can get out and talk about that neighbourhood model, talk about what it means to people practically. I think that's probably all I've got to say. I think it's important to understand how it will work, how local communities and residents will be able to interact so that they can genuinely be heard. And the key will generally be how satisfaction is measured and how we can demonstrate that we're both delivering better outcomes for our communities, better outcomes for residents, and also better use of the limited public sector resources that we continue to have.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Pavlovic, would you like to go ahead? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo the thanks that everybody makes to officers for the work that they've put into this, but I can't let tonight go without thanking Laura. She is the single most committed, dedicated officer, and I know that she's spent hours and hours on the weekends, in the evenings, writing this because she believes as wholeheartedly as any of us elected members in what this can achieve. And it's no coincidence that this paper comes immediately after the poverty report. And the points that Councillor Webb made is, you know, how do we reach out to every single citizen of this city? And whether you're wealthy or whether you're in an area of significant deprivation, you are eventually going to need services. And it's about saying, how do we help you to access those services from the people who you need to access it to, from, at a time that you need to access it. And bringing organisations together, not just health and social care. And it's interesting, Councillor Eyre rightly talked about prevention with falls. You know, that's delivered, the assessment for that is delivered by part of the communities and housing team. You know, it's about saying a systems approach which may turn out to be the biggest legacy that this administration will have in saying, this is how we can help you, not just in, around poverty, because that's really important, but to say, this is how we value you as individuals. And you know, we talk about neighbourhoods, and this is called the neighbourhood model. And Councillor Eyre is absolutely right. This has had cross-party support, and I've been, you know, it's been incredibly uplifting to hear the support that every single party and every single member that's been involved in scrutiny has had for this. Is, you know, a neighbourhood is, it can be anything. We have wards. They are arbitrary. Definitions of what a neighbourhood is. A neighbourhood can be a street. It can be a dozen houses. But when those communities come together to support each other, and we really want to help them to be able to do this, we can change how everybody feels about their neighbourhood, their community. We want to include people, not exclude them. And I really think this model will be able to help to do that. And as Laura heads off to an absolutely well-deserved promotion, I think she'll look back on what she's achieved at this council over the years with an immense sense of pride and satisfaction, and she goes with our good wishes and our huge thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic. And Councillor Stills-Walshaw. please go ahead.
Thank you, thank you. I just wanted to extend thanks as well to Laura on the huge amount of work that's been done by you and by the teams as well. We're so excited to take this forward. There's so many opportunities ahead as we reshape health and care and community support within communities. I think worth mentioning on this is how health and primary care, when we first started, it seemed like it was quite distant and we weren't working together, but having everyone now on the same page, I think is a real testament of how far we've come and how much progress we've made. This is about us having a new system for residents and working together with the residents to create this. The communities team are going to play such a big part in this and cementing it together and the implementation, and providing support to people where their need is in their community, where they can have it, and about building health and services that are needed for that community, not the community having created services that people think or they think should be there. Just another huge thank you to Laura, and I'm really pleased that we're looking at designing this system together with the goal of increased health outcomes in community and narrowing towards those gaps of where health inequalities exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steels-Walshaw. And before we go to the recommendations, Laura, I'd really like to thank you for all your work, and not just on this. You've done a tremendous amount of work across a huge range of community-based provision and really supporting those people who've needed it most in our city, including visitors from the Ukraine, refugees and asylum seekers, and all of our faith communities as well, and really holding us together as a city. A lot of what you have done has been really responsible for that. So we will miss you terribly, but we do wish you very good luck. And your new employer is really going to receive a gem coming through the door. So well done for that as well. So the recommendations for the neighbourhood model are on page 628 and 629, paragraph 24. And so we're being asked to note the progress and plans, and then we are being asked to approve the shared outcomes framework and practice model, and also approve the governance structure at paragraph 58. So please, can I see those in favour of that? Fantastic. So that's approved unanimously as well. So we now have approved the city neighbourhood model implementation phase, and we can start moving forward further with that. We're also already seeing some effect of it, and the neighbourhood caretakers feeds into this too: health, adult social care, public health. It's a really great opportunity, and we can't wait to see it bloom and come to the great potential that I think it really has. So thank you for that. Right, finally, we are coming towards the end now. Item number 18. So this is the Lord Mayoralty points for 2026. So if I can ask Bryn to introduce that to us, then we will get through this one as well. Thank you, Bryn. Off you go.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be conscious that this is an annual report, moving on from the position last year. So as you can see at paragraph 8, the calculation sets out how we determine Lord Mayoral allocations for the coming municipal year. That allocation leads to a Labour Lord Mayor for the 26-27 municipal year, and I would invite executive to agree that and consequently to look to nominate a Lord Mayor for the forthcoming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryn. So this is a factual paper looking at the points accumulated. Does anybody else other than me want to say anything on it? No. Okay. So what will happen then, we look at these recommendations and we're asked to agree the points allocation for the municipal year 26-27, and then that will go forward to full council and the announcement of the Labour Mayor for 26-27 at full council on Thursday. So can I see those who are in agreement with the recommendations on page 668 at paragraph 5 to approve these points allocation? So that's approved, and that is unanimously approved, Guy, for you. Thank you. Right, marvellous. Thanks very much, everybody. And so finally, we have urgent business. I've not been notified of any. We do not have any. We have made it through the mammoth task of this agenda. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Councillor Corbane.
For my chair, all of our executive agendas are mammoth. We're getting through quite a lot of work.
Yeah, an amazing amount of business and benefit and improvements for our city. So let's go forth and do them. Thanks, everybody, and see you next time. Goodbye.